So we're going to be talking about The Fugitive. This is a 1993 film starring Harrison Ford, Tommy Lee Jones. It's directed by Andrew Davis. Um, I think just to start off, I'll give a little bit of context about this movie for me, which is that this was a VHS tape that we had as kids, and it was one of my go-tos whenever I was home from school, whether sick or otherwise, to watch. So I've watched this movie a number of times. Um, I uh, I hadn't seen it for something like at least 10 years, maybe more, prior to this sort of rewatching for the sake of minor quibbles. And I was stunned by how amazing it is. I always knew it was a good film and I expected that it would be great, but it is extremely tight as a film. The storytelling is really great. It's paced perfectly, acted well. Direction is really solid. It's just about as unquibbleable a film as you can possibly choose.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's even why we're doing this, right? Is
Yeah.
because talking about here's behind the curtain. We're gonna see the man behind the curtain here. It's like we were just talking about like what episodes we could potentially do,
Yeah.
and then I brought up the idea of like what we do that's just unquibbleable. And
Mhm.
honestly, it took nothing but a second to think of this movie for me because it's unquibbleable. It's
Mhm.
perfect. Like this movie's amazing. I love it. Everything you said is spot on. The pacing is impeccable. The score is memorable.
Oh
It's
yeah.
well performed. Tommy Lee Jones won an Oscar for his performance in this movie. It was up for Best Picture, I believe. I was looking this up yesterday and I was like, what won? What could have won? What beat this? It was Schindler's List. So I guess I
Okay.
got to give it to that.
Fair
But
enough.
I think I watched this 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because I was feeling that sense of distance from it. I hadn't seen it in a long time, remembered it to be great.
Mhm.
And it's so good. Oh man, this movie's so good. I love it so much.
Yeah.
It has nostalgia for me as well, I think, because of that VHS tape that you're talking about. Um, I feel like I just watched it a lot as a kid.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's really fun to revisit a film that you've seen that many times after a long break because you really start noticing a lot of details that, sure, maybe you were like slightly conscious of the initial times you watched it, but that really sort of emphasize the greatness of a thing. And
Mhm.
one thing I really wanted to call out as being, I thought, excellent was how well cast and well drawn all of the secondary characters were. I think that's always a mark of a great film when even the supporting cast is just firing on all cylinders, and even characters that are in there for just a single scene just seem so, I don't necessarily want to use the word realistic, but they at least have verisimilitude, right?
Yeah.
And I really appreciated
Word.
that. All of the sort of the support police officers and agents were really, really great, interesting and unique and memorable in their own ways.
Mhm.
um you know
Even down to the people that lease the small apartment to him that he
yes.
lives in the basement, like the guy who's dealing drugs or whatever is like,
Yes.
yeah. And
they,
that's
they
I
could have
appreciate.
they could have gotten anybody to do that role, but they actually took the time to cast a really, really appropriate couple of
Yes.
people to play those roles, and they each had one or two lines, but it was somehow perfect.
Yeah, well, the dialogue really brings it home for those characters where, yeah, I mean, it's maybe even more of a pretentious word to use, but just the authenticity of it
Mhm.
feels, it just, you feel it. It's even just like, how many lines does that drug dealer guy have? Like two. He
Two.
says da,
Yeah.
when his mom is like asking him a question in Russian or Polish or whatever it is. And then there's the scene when he's being interrogated and the guy's like, you're telling me that this guy's in your basement? And he just says, that's what I'm telling you. And it's
And
like,
in that scene, he's got like a breakfast sandwich or something
yeah,
that he happens to be eating. Those are the
yeah,
details that just lesser filmmakers would just leave out. Yeah, he's in the
sure.
police station. He just needs to say this line. Somebody
Yeah.
had to think.
Mhm.
It would be great if he was also having this breakfast sandwich. And it
Yeah.
adds that realism and authenticity. I don't think that's a pretentious word. I think that's the exact right word for this.
Well, I think it's just to sidestep. It's just pretentious when it comes to film, in my opinion. Like the
Okay.
idea of authenticity, because like film is inherently a lie, so it's like you cannot be authentic if you're lying.
Sure. Sure.
I don't know. That's stupid. We shouldn't get into that. That's just my
No,
own
no.
pet theory about the whole thing. But yeah, there's just dialogue. There's just choices, details that make this movie extend past what it would be, I guess, in a modern era where it would just be kind of a police procedural. You could probably knock the story out in 60 minutes on like an episodic thing. But really taking the care to make sure that all the pieces fit, not just fit, but fit very well. You know, it's like not only a puzzle piece that goes in, but like the colors are adjacent. You know, it's just done with so much care. The first thing that kind of pops in my head that I wanted to mention that I really love is I didn't realize just how they were mirroring the characters Gerard and Kimball with one another, and the way Gerard is just like this obsessive kind of guy. It didn't land with me when I was 8 years old watching this movie, or 9 years old watching it. It was just like cop, Harrison Ford, like that's what those guys are. But I appreciate in a movie when they take the time to spell it out for you in a way that doesn't feel like they're hammering you over the head. And the scene for me for that character is right after they find the other convict in his home, and Gerard has shot him, and his, you know, I don't know what you would call his position, but Noah, his ear, he can't hear out of his ear.
Yeah.
And Gerard leans over and he says, "I don't bargain."
Yeah.
Like that line is so important because it draws the complete picture of that character for you, but in a way that's just set up beautifully. It's not, you know, it's not a monologue. He's not like explaining, "I'm an obsessive and I gotta," whatever.
Yeah.
It's subtle and it's nice.
It's very natural. It
Yes.
comes as an outgrowth of the conflict and the action, as opposed to being something that was clearly just you know, sort of planned ahead and placed in there for the audience's benefit. Agreed.
Totally.
Yeah. I am very interested in general in the structure of films, especially films that I really like, because I do think that my enjoyment of films, I feel, tends to correlate really strongly with good structure. And I was kind of asking myself, you know, looking from a bird's eye view, what was the dividing point between like Act 1, 2, and 3 of this film? I'm sure if you looked at the screenplay, you know, you would see Act 2 begin right on, you know, page 26 to 30 or something. But what would that moment be? You know, typically it's a big crisis moment, and I feel like it's the dam, when Harrison Ford jumps from the dam. That's kind of like Act 1 has now ended.
Yeah.
He's successfully basically escaped the initial dragnet that was put around him, and now he's really a fugitive. He's sort of a full-on fugitive. He has an opportunity to actually change the course of events. Act 2, you know, he's obviously doing investigation. There's a cat and mouse game happening, but I was kind of asking myself, what is the dividing line between Act 2 and 3? That's a little bit harder to come down to, just because as a thriller, the action just increases.
Yeah, I don't know. My knee-jerk reaction is the moment he goes to the one-armed man's apartment, like when he hangs up but doesn't hang up the phone, is kind of like, to me, that moment, because if you know that that's who did it, you know, he's got the proof. There's more intrigue left to be found out, obviously, about Nichols and all his involvement and whatnot, but that is the moment where also you kind of open up with Gerard doing a semi interrogation of him in that room. And I think that's also the moment where you realize Gerard knows that this guy might be the one who actually did the killing. So it's kind of flipping the script in that moment.
It's so satisfying as a viewer when you get to that point, when you realize the cops, they finally understand that Kimball didn't do it, and they're on his trail. You know, Kimball left the breadcrumbs, and
right. Well, it's not even that. It's that, you know, part of the line, "I don't care," and why he says that, and even that phone conversation, he said, that's what he brings up, which is why maybe that is the perfect act break right there, is he asked him, "Do you remember what you said in the tunnel?" He said he didn't care. The whole point is that Gerard and his team, they're just doing their job. Like, they're trying to find this guy. They want to bring him in. That's it. They don't care about what happened. He was convicted straight up. So for them, that's the moment, I think, where they realize that he's trying to solve what happened. Like, that's Kimball. They're realizing, oh, he's not just evading us. Like, he's actually trying to figure out what's going on here. And it's not just got to find money somewhere and got to find a place to hide or whatever. No, he's trying to solve the murder for them, basically.
I feel like there's a transition point for all of the police characters where where they kind of become good guys as opposed to antagonists in a certain sense, because they themselves, I think, it's often said that like in a good story, your characters must change. They have to start out rigid and then become less rigid or whatever it is. And I think that kind of signals the moment of change for Gerard and the other police officers, where they're less at that point. They're still interested, I think, in catching up with Kimball, of course, but I think at that point they're starting to deviate from I don't care and starting to make it much more like, actually, we've got a puzzle to solve here. Like clearly there's somebody we need to get that's not just
it's also built with a perfect catalyst that the one-armed man shoots a Chicago police officer. So it becomes the US Marshals have to get to him before Chicago PD does, because Chicago PD will murder him for something he didn't even do, because it's something he didn't even do. It's the perfect leveling up. That's what makes this movie just so great. I actually wrote down a couple of things for the first time because I know this movie well enough. I feel like I could play it through in my head without too much struggle, but I did write some things down that I admire, or little details about this that I really like. And one of them is, well, they're one and the same. One is that there's always an inherent proximity of Kimball to the US Marshals. Like whether it's he's on the train and the guy's like driving the car next to the train that Kimball is on, or Kimball is in the elevator and the cops come into the elevator, or he's on the street and a cop car goes by him. Like he's always like right next to them, but never caught. And I love that because they keep that super consistent for the whole thing. But that leads into another small detail about how there's a scene where Gerard is talking to Nichols for the first time, and he's like, no, you'll never find him. He's too smart. And they're like, well, we're smart guys. Like, what is he smarter? Who's smarter? And he's like, no, he's smarter than me. I love how they showcase Kimball being smarter every time. And it's like in the dam scene when he goes down that little thing that Gerard falls down, like Kimball takes the smart way.
Yeah.
And Gerard does not.
I didn't even think about that, but that's a great.
Well, it indicates, that no, he is indeed one step ahead or smarter. And the other more obvious great one is when he's looking for potential candidates with the arm, the hybrid arm, and he gets 5 hits and they get like 47 hits because he's just that much smarter than them and he knows how to narrow it down even further. They just do that in this movie constantly. That's such good detail. I love that. Yeah. Those were two major things. And I think maybe the last thing I want to bring up just before, because I think we should try. I attempted to quibble on this, and I have a couple of things that I can bring up. But before doing that, I want to throw this at you. I was thinking like, who could make this movie now? I don't think it needs to be remade because it's such a good film. And I was thinking, I really feel like Fincher would do a great job with a movie like this because he already makes movies like this that are tons of little interstitial scenes that matter and details, but a pace that it doesn't stop. It just locomotive through the whole thing.
I think that's an excellent choice. Fincher he's a thriller director. And so the subject matter works. He has some obsessions around murder. And so I think the subject matter also works. Yeah. When I think about directors with an attention to detail that really shows up in every scene, he definitely comes up at the top of my list. The pacing, the plotting. I think that's an excellent choice. I'm not sure that I can think of better.
It's like the Coens maybe could do something like this.
It would be so different if it was the Coens, but
it would be a little too cutesy maybe.
Yeah, if Fincher did it, it would, you can imagine it would feel like Zodiac felt to watch, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Or I was thinking also The Game. He makes these movies with very large scope where, God, you just know so much footage ended up on the cutting room floor in any of these movies where it's like, even just the montage in the middle of The Fugitive where he's kind of like making IDs and the cops go back to his apartment. It's like, that's not nothing to do. And I'm sure those scenes are extended and have more dialogue that you're meant to hear, but you don't hear it because it's in a montage and it's under that fantastic score. So it's like, I don't know. That's putting a lot of effort into something that is going to take up no screen time. And I feel like Fincher does that as well.
Scenes that will take 1 second that
Yes.
really convey a lot when they're there and that
Yes.
are totally worth it. But you could
Mhm.
see just you could see that not happening in so many movies.
Right. Oh, here's a perfect example of that too. Another detail that I loved is it's such a throwaway, and I think I'm interpreting this the way that the filmmakers want, but it's during that same interstitial sort of montage scene, and it's Gerard in his office, and he is looking at a photograph of the crime scene that is taped to his window.
Mhm.
Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like really quick. He's just like standing there looking at it. But what's so great about that is dude's got like a corner office, and he's got this great view that he could be looking at, but he's decided to put this picture of the crime scene up that effectively blocks his view of the outside world. He's so obsessive that it's like, I'm, picture, window, that's what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at what's outside the window. I think that's really purposeful and great character drawing. Yeah,
for sure. The characterization appears in the environment. And again, it's just a detail that you can imagine being completely omitted or missed in some other kind of second-rate thriller. But this really just, the planning and the intent behind every single scene is just, you just feel it in this movie all the way through.
Yeah. So clearly we love this movie.
Yeah.
And maybe it's time for us to stop praising it, because
sure.
we could praise it all day long. I'm curious if you have any.
So I only have a couple of quibbles to really name. One is so minor that it's hilarious, but in one of the scenes that takes place, I can't remember if it's before the dam or after it, but it's when Kimball initially sneaks into a hospital or a clinic, and he goes into like an old man's room, and he goes into the bathroom to sort of clean himself up. And in the midst of this, a nurse comes in, and he has to hide behind a door. While that happens, there's a little seam in the edit where you can tell that a cut was made. Okay, so that's one quibble.
Okay. Yeah.
My next one is maybe more major, but it's also one of those quibbles that could be justified. Like if we were to speak to the writer or the filmmakers, we might get an answer. And that is that I'm sorry, the main antagonist name, it's the actual antagonist, not Lentz. It's
what's you talking about? Nichols?
Nichols, thank you.
The doctor.
I blanked on the name. Yeah, Dr. Nichols. I do not understand what his endgame would have been in setting up this conspiracy to first of all, get behind this RDU90 protocol, then whack a bunch of people who are going to expose the fact that it's causing problems. What's his endgame going to be? They're going to release the medication, and eventually it's going to come out that it causes liver damage, and then he's going to be the one who's kind of hung out to dry because he's the proponent of it. So how is it really helping long term murder all these people?
I had an answer until you dropped the fact that eventually they would know that anyway.
Yeah, so more studies would take place, and
that's a lot more foresight than I had on it, because I think the obvious answer is that they say that Devlin McGregor made 7.5 billion in a year. So it's pharmaceuticals make a lot of money. I'm sure that his whole point is that he wants to make a lot of money. He wants to be the face of this drug that's going to make him a billionaire, probably, in partnership with Devlin McGregor. But you're right. It's once the drug comes out, but I guess there's plausible deniability. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he makes the money, but then the guilt ends up getting ascribed to Devlin McGregor as a corporation as opposed to him. Or Lentz. Yeah, no, that's totally true. Yeah. Maybe that's, if I were the, if I were, to call back to The Simpsons, if I were to give a which did it answer to the nerd's question about the plot hole, I think that would be my answer, that he was going to pin any problems that occurred on Lentz, but he was going to personally profit from all this.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. That's a quibble that we could argue our way out of. Yeah. Here's one that I don't know, and maybe you can enlighten me. And something that bothered me, this is probably the only actual minor quibble that I have about it. Everything else is a little silly, and I'm gonna rattle them off for you because I'm curious to see your reaction. But only at one point in this movie does he get money from Nichols, when it's the scene where he drives out of the tennis club and window washer, but then oh my god, Kimball, he gives him a couple of bucks. He says maybe that was a couple $100, but even if he gave him $1,000, the period of time that this takes place over, which is a year, I think is what they're trying to posit, maybe.
No, it can't possibly be.
Or maybe it's a
It's
while.
it's a maximum of like a month or two, because it's winter when the train crashes. Like, it's cold outside, the leaves
Yeah,
are off of the trees. I was actually going to mention that the seasonality of it really adds something. He's shivering when
totally.
he get out of the water. And
Absolutely.
then it's St. Patrick's Day
Oh,
when
fair enough. Yeah,
climax
St.
is happening,
Patrick's
so
Day.
it
But
can't be
like
more than like a month or two.
even after that, though, I forget what it is. I'm gonna have to think about it. Maybe
Sure.
I'm gonna just argue with you off of this quibble,
Yeah.
because there's something else that indicated that it was a really long time, like longer than expected.
Well, still though, I think it's worth saying that I think your point stands, that you only
Yeah,
see him getting money once. And even
once.
if it
Where's
is
he?
only a couple of months, that's not going to last him for all of the
Right.
films.
So where's he getting the money? Because he's got like a new suit. He's
Yeah.
able to buy all this, like he's able to go into a hotel. I know
Yeah.
those things probably don't cost a ton of money, but it's like, where is he getting money to do any of the things that he's doing? And
Yeah.
it's like,
He
they
did have the
don't
job as a janitor. I mean, that was one income stream, but that only
do.
lasted.
Are we presuming he had the job, or that he was just
Oh,
using
actually,
the
no, that's
job?
true. Yeah, no, he just had the ID card and he snuck in. But yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah. Where is he getting the
So
money?
money. I don't know where he's getting it. He's certainly not getting it out of his own account, because he would get caught.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a great answer to that. I think it would come down to the filmmakers saying like, well, you just have to assume that he,
Figured it out.
yeah, he did an odd job for people now and then, and he made a couple of bucks, and he made ends meet somehow.
Yeah.
But we're not going to show that to you because it's boring, and yeah.
And detrimental to the plot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, again, that's a minor quibble, but I was thinking about that. Like,
Yeah.
huh.
Every thriller like that is so tightly composed, I think is going to inevitably have issues like that. Whether it's what was the end game of
Yeah.
What were some of your minor quibbles? I'm very eager to know.
So these are similar to your edit thing, because they're so tiny and just like technical things that it's like I had to think about. I had to reach on this, which is saying something about how good this movie is that like very little you can find wrong with it. All right, so number one, and these are going to go in order of the movie, so they may not be my favorites or the strongest ones, but okay. In the very beginning, when the bus flips over and they're on the tracks and they're all kind of like groggy and getting up, there is a very distinct train sound, and the one guard who survives, not the one who got stabbed, but the one, like the older one who gets just off of the bus, he says, "What the hell is that?" And it's like, okay, that's a train. It's like, unless you forgot what trains sound like, I don't know why one would ever say, "What the train sound? What the hell was that?"
Yeah. Well, okay, I'm just going to excuse that slightly, because they were not, maybe they didn't know that they were near train tracks, and so I don't know, the bus
it's
crashes,
really,
and then oh shit, the buses crash. They don't know where they are, and so when they hear he's like, "What the hell is that?" And it's not like literally he doesn't recognize the sound. He knows it's a train, but it's more saying like, "Oh shit, we're like in the path of an oncoming train."
Yeah, no, I know, but it is like it was one of those moments. I don't know. There's a very similar moment in this is totally left field. I apologize. In Jurassic Park 3, where you see the pterodactyls for the very first time, and they're like in this misty area or whatever, and then they realize, one of them says, "We're in a bird cage," and he says, "A bird cage for what?" And it's like, yeah, probably a fucking bird of some kind. Like, why even ask that question? A bird cage for what? Anyway, it's stupid. Like I said, these are minor and dumb.
Well, can I actually attach one to yours? And again, this might have an excuse, but I was slightly conscious of the fact that Harrison Ford is the last person to get off of the bus.
Yes.
Right. He pushes the other guy out, and he very, very, with a huge amount of struggle, he gets out, pushes himself out just as the train crashes into it. And you, in fact, see him jumping free of that. And then moments later, the train is approaching him again, and he has to run forward and like duck to get out of its way underneath like a bridge or something like that.
Oh, didn't even perceive that. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's, I mean, the excuse would be that was a previous segment of the train. It's like the first part of the train hit the bus, kept going, and somehow the impact of that made the trains kind of detach. And so a subsequent segment of the train, it independently derailed and started coming.
Yes.
But I seem to remember there being a light
Yeah, and
on
has a
that
light on
second,
it.
so it almost seems like the train kind of comes twice. I need to rewatch it to determine if that's the case, but yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good one. That is a good one. And mine, because you're right. Yeah.
I almost don't want to make that a certainty here on this video. I kind of want to, we need to research to determine if it's actually a
Well,
problem.
here's a couple more that I can say with certainty. This is another one that takes place during the sequence because right after the other convict says, I don't care which way you go, just don't follow me. There's a shot of Kimball running along the river. And then moments later, Gerard is giving his very famous speech of every, yard, every doghouse, whatever, like, I want you to search them all. And during that speech, they repeat that exact same shot of Kimball running along the river.
Okay.
Like, I don't know why they decided to use the exact same shot, but,
Good eye.
Well, yeah. And here's one that I remember from when I was a kid. And so this is probably 9 years old, 10 years old. When, let's be honest, I didn't understand what was going on in this movie. Like when they approach the other convict's house and some of them are playing garbage men, Gerard and Noah are playing drunks, as they approach the house, basically because they're going in undercover. I didn't understand what was going on in that scene. I didn't understand why they were homeless all of a sudden or whatever. But in that
as a kid, you didn't understand that. And yeah, okay.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Yes. I understand as an adult now what they were doing. But I noticed this when I was a kid is that as you follow Gerard and Noah up to that house, they go under some tree branches and one of those branches hits the front of the camera and it like pushes it out of the way.
Oh, okay.
And it's just one of those immersive breaking moments where it just happened and they kept it, whatever. But I will throw that into one of my very, very minor quibbles.
That's a good quibble though. I like that.
Yeah. There's the scene where they realize that Kimball is probably at the convention center. And so Gerard and Joey Pants are driving and they have to do a U-turn. And when they do the U-turn, it's going the wrong direction from the way he's turning the wheel. It's nice. The way he turns the wheel is not the way that the outside world would be turning.
Okay.
Super dumb, but something I noticed. This is indicative of maybe the 90s and things that happened in this era of filmmaking. But when Kimball and Frederick Sykes are on the subway or on the L train and are fighting one another, there are some very stupid, what I would consider stupid punching sounds that are just like, so it's almost like you're watching Batman from the 1960s or something where it's like, I don't know. Those are just,
the Foley artist has like a dowel rod and a piece of cabbage and he's just hitting it.
Exactly. I love that. Oh man, you're so accurate with how that actually would sound. It's like, yeah.
Well, okay, just on that, I just want to pause you because could that be because Foley art has progressed since that time, or we're more used to different effects being used for those types of
I think it's become more realistic anymore, and to hear something that just does not resemble what an actual punch or a kick against clothes would sound like, it's just
no Foley sound effect is actually realistic. I mean, you hear a whipping sound sometimes when people kick, and that actually is not actually realistic. But it sounds like you're saying that while acknowledging that all Foley art is inherently unrealistic, this was particularly like cartoonish sounding.
It's excessive and not as believable, I think, as we have grown to hear. Or maybe I'm wrong, maybe that's just how it sounds when you punch somebody in the face. My very last one, and this one is just kind of humorous to think about, I think, as somebody who kind of works in production. And I've also done a lot of conventions like the one that we see in the end of the movie where he's giving his keynote speech. Like, I've worked at a lot of those in my career, just like making my way through. And
I think I know what you're gonna say, but go on.
Oh no, please predict. I want to see if you know what I'm about to say.
Well, I mean, maybe this isn't a quibble. I don't know if this is a mistake or not, but I thought it was very strange that the spotlight was following the character.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. It was so humorous because it's kind of like, I could just imagine myself up there being like, oh man, like I'm going to see what's going on over here. Oh shit, they're moving this. It's just humorous to think. Clearly they did it because they needed the light and it was a creative choice, but just thinking about the person who might be operating that spotlight. That's
You know,
where the
it's
action is.
yeah, I feel like there's an opportunity to do something like, like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, where it's like, the whole movie is spent with these like, characters that are totally ancillary to the story we all know. What we need is a movie that's just all about that guy, the guy who
Yeah.
has the spotlight. What's
It's
his
like
life
90 minutes of him
know?
like setting up for, what are you doing today? I don't know, some pharmaceutical thing. Like, it was a bunch of rich people, man. I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, yeah. Yeah. And the movie would end with him going home to his roommate.
You
And
won't
being like,
believe
oh,
what
the
I saw
craziest
today.
thing. Yeah.
I made
that's
sure
it.
everyone could see the action though.
Yeah. It was crazy, but I did a good job. Yeah, so that's really all I have as far as quibbles, and they're not even real quibbles. They're just like technical things that
Yeah.
they don't even make up. Like if you added all those together into one quibble, like it would maybe still only be half a quibble.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you're gonna miss the forest for those trees. I doubt it. It's not. Yeah.
There are some movies that are actually quite popular that are worse than that set of quibbles by itself. Like if you only made a movie just including those quibbles, like there are plenty of popular movies that are actually worse than even that. So as a whole,
totally.
Yeah, it's like I'd rather watch all the quibbles of The Fugitive than watch a lot of other movies.
Oh, I see what you said. Yeah, it's like those alone are more entertaining than than a lot of what you would get in general. Yeah, I think I thought a lot about, I already brought it up, the idea of who would remake this, or would this be worth remaking? And I still, again, don't think that it is yet, because it holds up perfectly well.
Really well, yeah.
But I there is a world where I almost think you could almost like James Bond this movie in a way, where it's like, here's something, growing up and having seen this movie. I don't know how many times I've seen this movie. It's a lot. It's not the most, but it's a lot. And, only once I saw it as an adult, which was a couple of years ago, I watched it and probably hadn't seen it in 15, 20 years or something. That math is wrong. I probably have that way wrong. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. I was a kid when I watched it and loved it, and then I didn't watch it for a bunch of years, and then I was an adult and finally understood like what was going on.
Yeah.
Like this intrigue about a pharmaceutical company that's like falsifying their data. It's like, I didn't get that when I was a kid.
Right.
But it made me think that because that's an interesting arc for a movie, or for what this movie is like about. Yeah, it's about the murder and whatever, but like, what is the central reasoning behind all of these things that are happening? You could almost just drop a new John Kimball situation. It's like, what could you dream up for a reason why some guy with one arm ends up killing said wife, and then John Kimball has to like figure out what's going on. It's like the plot underneath that. You could cycle that in and out and have a new Fugitive movie every 2 years if you wanted.
You wanted to, yeah. You could do an anthology TV show. I know it originated as a TV show, but have a different motivation for the fugitivization of a person.
Yeah. Even if you kept it about one-armed man, John and Detective Gerard, as still the same characters, just under a different scenario, and then it's like movie of the week almost.
Different prosthetic based villain every time, and the guy with the man with no nose or whatever.
A man with no nose. I don't know.
The no nose man would be more poetic.
Yeah.
But okay, yeah. I mean, I do like to think just about one thing is like, who's going to star like in this hypothetical David Fincher directed update of The Fugitive for modern times.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a non-answer.
Okay.
I understand that there are some recognizable people in this movie. Tommy Lee Jones, Harrison Ford, Julianne Moore. Of course, then she wasn't as well known, nor was Jane Lynch, but like they're known actors. And that grouping right there, you could consider obviously Harrison Ford and Julianne Moore, but like you could consider them very attractive, or attractive enough. Maybe not Tommy Lee Jones and maybe not Jane Lynch, but it's like you would put them in an echelon of beauty, but that's it. And like nobody else in this movie is that way. And I miss that about movies, kind of, that the answer to this question is like not Ryan Gosling.
Sure.
Not, you know what I mean? Like,
it doesn't need to be one of the pretty boys of modern cinema.
It doesn't need any pretty anyone. Like what makes this kind of an interesting flick altogether is it's just it's spectacular in certain ways, but it's kind of unremarkable to today's standard as far as like the climax of it all. You know, it's like a couple of guys wrestling in a hotel suite,
Yeah.
you know, on the
Yeah.
rooftop. Yeah, there's a helicopter and some gunfire, but it's like the rest of it's pretty low key to today's standards. And I think you
Yeah.
achieve part of that by having some no names, people who aren't just perfect, you know. So I don't know who that would be. So that's my non-answer. It's like somebody
Yeah.
unremarkable.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an interesting way to go about it. I could, you know, realistically, a movie like this is going to be a tentpole, right? And it's going to need to have like somebody with star power in the center. But you know, I would like it if it was somebody who had a more of a gritty look to them, for example. You know, and it still had that cast of supporting characters who are just they look authentic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Believable.
Yeah. I guess I don't have an answer right now. I just need to think about who would.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a question. Yeah. Leave a comment and like to subscribe.
Yep.
Tell us who you
Smash
think
that like button. Yeah.
tell us who you think is going to play Gerard in our remake of The Fugitive. Yeah, I don't have anything else except praise for this movie. That's it. So I think my feeling on this is, if you've never seen this movie, you already know what's going on in this movie because it exists in pop culture and you're aware of certain things, but watch it anyway because it's great. Yeah, you have no other way of watching it except, you know, probably digitally or if you buy the Blu-ray. But I would almost even recommend, if you've never seen this movie and you're into thrillers or Harrison Ford, just buy the Blu-ray. It's worth owning, I think, and not digitally. You know, it's just worth owning because you will want to revisit it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so rewatchable. Could rewatch it once a year. I agree 100%. This is something that I'm glad that we're talking. This is the first of this series that we're talking about a film that is from, you know, a yesteryear. And it's really fun because to talk about this film in particular, because you don't, even though, like you said, a lot of it has seeped into popular culture, you don't hear it talked about that much. People aren't, you know, there's I've heard no whisperings that there's going to be a new Fugitive movie. There's no sense that, oh, there's going to be a, you know, Hulu's going to do Hulu's The Fugitive at some point in the future, starring Jake Gyllenhaal or whatever it is. And I just like, I just hope that there are people who have not seen this, who watch this and like, shit, I got to check that out. And I hope that you love it as much as it deserves.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point too, because it's like nowadays anything you make has to be a TV show. So they would make a movie, they would make a TV show, and it's like, yeah, I get that this was a TV show initially, and so that's what it would be based on. But I don't know that this plot is thick enough to last 10 hours. I think it works as a 2-hour punch in the face. You know? Yeah,
I agree. I'd like to see them not spread it too thin and end up just taking all the power out of it.
Yeah, I agree. And you inadvertently cast Jake Gyllenhaal.
That was just my guess, my kind of back of the envelope. That's probably, I mean, I think he actually would do a good job in it. But
yeah, cool.
All right, well, yeah, let's, you know, not drag it out, just like The Fugitive, just ends right after the climax. Yeah,
perfect.